As the Biden administration pushes ahead with efforts to reach an agreement with Saudi Arabia, one that would include normalization between the kingdom and Israel, it appears Jerusalem isn't sitting idly by. The Axios news site reported that Mossad director David Barnea secretly visited Washington in recent weeks for talks with senior White House and CIA officials. Jerusalem wants to give its input, given Riyadh's demand for U.S. support for a Saudi civilian nuclear program and the sale of advanced weapon systems to Riyadh.
ישראל לא מעורבת כרגע בשיח בין האמריקאים לסעודים. לא נדרש אישור שלנו. זה עשרות מדינות מקיימות פרויקטים של כורים גרעיניים, אזרחיים, ואיננו דבר שמסכן לא אותם ולא את שכניהם. בשכונה שלנו למצרים יש כור כזה, ולאמירויות יש כור כזה.
Based on a string of reports, Saudi demands for normalization with Israel have been expansive and would include significant concessions to the Palestinians. Last week, the New York Times' Thomas Friedman outlined such steps, including an official promise not to annex the West Bank and to stop settlement building or expansion.
You know, the kingdom has a policy, which is we believe in a two-state solution. We want to see a thriving Israel. We want to see a thriving Palestine. Vision 2030 talks about a unified, integrated, thriving Middle East. And last I checked, Israel was there.
But members of Netanyahu's right-wing coalition have rejected any concessions toward the Palestinians as part of a pact. And they're not the only ones opposing it.
The Islamic Republic of Iran would not consider any step in the direction towards normalization of ties with the Zionist regime to be beneficial to the Palestinian nation and their cause, nor does it consider it to be beneficial to peace, security, and stability in the region.
And so, while no breakthrough has been announced regarding the U.S.-Saudi talks, the many and frequent visits to the kingdom by key U.S. officials suggest that the Biden administration sees serious prospects for an accord at some point in time. If, that is, the obstacles can be overcome.
So for more on this, we have Ruth Wasserman-Lande here in the studio and our friend Abdulla Aljenaid in Manama joining us as well. Let's start with the lady here. Ruth, well, it's a complicated deal, obviously.
A tad.
But on the Israeli angle, can Israel deliver?
Well, it depends. With the current government, the very or even most right-wing government that ever existed in Israeli politics, no. But in my humble opinion, is Netanyahu planning a certain change at some point in this government without outwardly saying, let's say, as much at this particular moment? Yes, I do believe so. I believe this is his strategic plan. I believe he's doing everything to move forward with that, and I do believe that he would like this to be his legacy, which means that he'll go a long way to make it happen.
Abdallah, what are we talking about in terms of the Palestinian issue? What kind of concessions the Saudis are looking for?
Okay, I will totally agree with what Ruth said. It is, prospecting for the suitable legacy that Netanyahu think it's befitting what he did for Israel or the international, arena. With regard to the Palestinian issue, I believe it was the Saudis who, tabled a peace initiative back in 2002 by the late King Abdullah. Until today, not even a single Israeli politician have recognized that this may represent something worth talking to. How could the Saudis even consider talking about, the prospect of recognition without the Israelis even dignifying, addressing that initiative?
Okay, ball to you, Ruth. So if Israeli government and Netanyahu wants to go ahead with this, what kind of political changes you might foresee here?
So let's begin with the background. I think that there is a huge interest geostrategic interest in terms of Saudi Arabia on the one hand and the United States on the other hand, and it's all time sensitive, particularly for the United States before the elections, before catatonic changes may change, let's say, the politics there as well. But then it's very obvious that this will not be similar to the agreements made with the other Abraham Accord countries. This is something of a much bigger weight in terms of the responsibility for the entire Islamic world, and therefore I believe that the Saudis would want to see significant changes, and I agree with my counterpart and our guest in the studio that some kind of recognition, or at least a kind of a polite mention of the Saudi initiative that is not a young one anymore, but at least a kind of respect to mention the fact that this is not the first time that the Saudis have raised their hands and said, you know, we are willing in certain circumstances and under certain conditions to recognize the state of Israel. There's no antagonism towards that idea in essence.
Okay, back to you, Abdullah. I'm asking now, what will the Saudis be willing to give in return? What's their extra mile?
Put it this way, I believe 2 weeks ago, it was the first time that the Israeli national anthem was played in the capital of Saudi Arabia. Have you ever thought that this was something possible? Now, the Saudis have and could bring to the table the whole Arabic and the Islamic world what Israel need to match, to bring to the table. At the present time, the Israelis need to see Israel as part of a region, and they need to rethink their approaches. It's not just the Israeli national security that is at the far front of everything that needs to be done. We need collectively to see that our stability and security is one whole thing. It's not Israel, it's not Saudi Arabia, it's not UAE or Bahrain or the rest. We need to address it collectively. And the minute we start doing this, as we did with regard to the Iranian nuclear issue with the American, and they started paying attention, including the European. Now, the Israelis need totally and collectively need to rethink. Are they part of our region? And based on that, they need to re-engineer their approaches to issues related to what the region need and not just what the Israelis need.
And I want to ask you, Ruth, vis-a-vis what's happening inside Israel these days. Is this even possible?
It's very, very difficult for me personally and on a professional level as well, seeing what is happening here, to even imagine it. On the other hand, again, I do believe that some kind of an agreement still is possible. And I say this with a true belief. It depends what will be on the table. Something like what we are discussing in terms of a complete change of the rules of the game in geostrategic terms, in terms of truly being accepted, as our guest has said, into the region and playing a role as part and parcel of the region. I believe that it is possible to put these things aside in return for that very big catatonic change. And by the way, I think that Saudi Arabia is looking for stability in order to look inward and make it a leader in the region.